Welcome to the Lonestar Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Williams. This is episode 31. This week, we are joined by guests Lisa Bueno and David Bass. We are going to be talking about the Texas Veterans Medical Cannabis Conference coming up in April. Lisa Bueno is the outreach coordinator for VET Coalition, Veterans Educating Texans. And David Bass is the Veterans Coordinator, Outreach Coordinator for Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. How are y'all doing today?
Doing good, man. Glad to be
Fantastic.
here.
Yes, welcome.
Great.
So to have two very influential people joining us today. So thank you guys so much for being here, taking the time.
Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me, man.
We're all over the state. Lisa's in New Braunfels. David's in Killeen. Austin's in Dallas. And I'm in Austin, if that makes sense.
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
Yeah, we're all touching some part of I-35, I believe, or getting or close to it. So what's the weather like down south? Is it nasty and cloudy like it is here?
It's rolling in. It's looking pretty gray out here, nice and humid, and looks like it's about to rain soon.
Yeah, man. It's like 85 degrees today out here. It's super muggy, hot. This change.
Tornado weather, man. It's tornado time.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. There was some activity this time last week in y'all's area. That was some.
Round Rock.
Yeah. Scary situation, but we're all kind of used to it. I think at this point, right? Like we all get Texas weather. How up a roller coaster it is. So.
Yeah, I grew up in Oklahoma,
for sure.
man. I'm used to dodging tornadoes in April. April's tornado month.
I was stationed in Wichita, Kansas for a whole 6 years. I was in the Air Force and still not a fan of tornado season. Never got used to that. I grew up in Houston around hurricanes. I can do hurricanes. You can predict when a hurricane's coming, but the tornadoes, they just pop up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm never going to be a fan of tornado season. I was in middle school and I was at a school event and a tornado hit our school when I lived out in Harper outside of Fredericksburg. So that wonderful experience to grow up with.
And man, glad you're still here.
So David, you originally started this cannabis conference for veterans. How many years ago? 3-4 years ago?
Well, we had our first Veterans Medical Cannabis Seminar in the history of the state of Texas at the George Washington Carver Library in Austin in 2014. Was our very first one, and we've had quite a few since then.
Wow, I was way off.
What was that first meeting like? What was that experience like in 2014 versus now?
Well, Texas Normal sponsored the veteran event. And so we went down to George Washington Carver Library. They said we were welcome to have it there. They gave us a room that seated 85 people. And so we advertised on social media, put out a community announcement in the Austin newspaper. We weren't sophisticated enough back then to be doing press releases, but I didn't know if anybody would actually show up. And we had fantastic speakers lined up. And on the day of the conference, 85 veterans walked through the door. And I was really curious who these veterans were. And so I did a veteran roll call. Starting with the most recent wars, I asked for the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan to stand up, and a bunch of young guys stood up. And then I stepped my way back through every conflict that we've had. We got to the Vietnam War, and the largest group of veterans stood up. They were Vietnam War veterans. And then I asked if we had any Korean War veterans, and two elderly veterans stood up in the back of the room. And I was astounded and honored. We were all honored to have two Korean War veterans there. And I knew then that we could build a really strong veterans movement in Texas that would be unstoppable because of all these veterans that just saw something about a medical cannabis conference. We called it medical marijuana seminar back then. And here they were, they showed up. So I knew that veterans in Texas were interested in medical cannabis.
And Lisa, you just started going to legislative sessions this last session, correct?
Correct. This was my first one out. Yeah.
How did you get wrangled into this as a veteran?
Actually, following Dave's stuff on Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. I just got on social media and started looking up different cannabis organizations and found Texas Normal. And then from there, found Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana, found the Collective, found Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, FIT, got into the mix with everybody and just started showing up at events. In 2018 or 19, I believe, is when I met Dave at the New Braunfels Veterans Day Parade. That was my first time out. And then I've just kind of been around it ever since. Yeah, and then just went out to the Capitol that first time this past legislative session. Just saw one of Heather's action alerts and just showed up.
Yeah, the dynamic at the Capitol this past session was quite unique, I think, to what we've experienced in the past and what we'll probably experience in the future with COVID in the mix, and then on top of that, some of the domestic situations regarding safety at the Capitol building. So it was a very, I would say this was the emptiest I'd ever seen the Capitol, especially on day one. But going through just the process, there was far less people because of the pandemic. And so it made for a very, very interesting legislative session in 21. And so I'm not quite sure what we're going to see in 23, but hopefully it's not as chaotic and crazy.
I learned a lot this first year, for sure. It was very eye-opening to be out there and see the whole process in action. So, but I enjoyed it.
David, when you first started doing this, like, what was the experience for you going to the Capitol to meet with people and talk to them about what was going on with marijuana laws in Texas?
My first legislative session was 2013. I joined Texas Normal in 2012 and became the Veteran Outreach Director in 2013. And so my first mission that I was given by Texas Normal was that Texas Normal asked for people in every House district in the entire state of Texas to contact Texas Normal. They sent us a packet of scientific information about medical cannabis and a little book about medical cannabis, and asked us to deliver this package personally to our House representative. And so I went to the Capitol for the very first time. I had never been to the Capitol. My representative was Jimmy Don Aycock, a very conservative Republican. And I went to the Capitol. I went to his office. His wife, who kind of ran the office for him, said, Jimmy Don's in a committee meeting. But she said, I'll be happy to talk to you. So Jimmy Don Aycock's wife sat down, and that was the very first time that I ever talked to anybody at the Capitol about medical cannabis. And it was a wonderful, uplifting experience. She was very kind. But then, and she said, I'm going to put this packet on Jimmy Don's desk so he sees it when he comes in. But then I found out that later, Jimmy Don Aycock did not want to hear the word marijuana in his office. His wife was a lot more open-minded than he was. And so for that entire legislative session, Jimmy Don Aycock actively avoided me and refused to meet with me or talk to me or even allow any of his aides to talk to me about medical cannabis. In fact, if he saw me coming down the hallway, he would duck down one of those side hallways and disappear into some office. He was actively avoiding me. He did not want to talk about medical cannabis. And so that was not unusual in 2013. Legislators did not want to discuss this issue at all.
How is that? How do you think that has changed? I mean, obviously 9 years later, where we're at now, there's just so much has drastically changed. The dynamics around the country have drastically changed. The legislature itself, the attitudes towards cannabis has changed. What does that look like now for you when you go to the Capitol? How are you received when you go talk to legislators?
Now, we're welcomed into almost every office to talk about medical cannabis. And back in 2013, Cheyenne G. Weldon, the executive director of Texas Normal, and Jax James, the deputy director of Texas Normal, they were preaching a very important message to all of us. They said, let's break the stigma. Let's get rid of this stigma that when we walk into legislators' offices to talk about cannabis, that they see Cheech and Chong. We don't want them to see Cheech and Chong as much as we love Cheech and Chong. What we want our legislators to see are law-abiding, hard-working, family people Texans coming in, making rational, logical arguments why we need to reform cannabis laws in Texas. So they said, let's not go in and reinforce the stereotype of crazy stoners in Texas. Let's break the stereotype. Let's change the stereotype. And thanks to all of us, we've done that. When we go to the Capitol now, we are respected because our legislators know we are regular Texans, hardworking family people making logical arguments about reforming cannabis law.
How was that for you, Lisa, when you first started off? Was it feeling the first time walking the halls of the Capitol to go to legislators' offices?
Honestly, it was intimidating at first. I was totally out of my element, something that I would never do in the past. But I just decided it was time to get off the sidelines. So I just showed up, and I met you the first day, Jesse. I also met Sean Meredith. He took me around that first day and showed me the ropes, and we went into knocking on some doors into the representatives' offices, and then went around with Jax James. So definitely a good mentor to start out with, to learn the ropes from the beginning. So I just tried to sit back and really just watch and observe from the veterans, that have been in the game for a while, and see how you guys approach everything, and just try to take everything in. I like to sit back and observe and try to absorb things before I jump in there. And so yeah, it was intimidating, but like I said, I learned a lot, and I'm glad I did it. And I'll be ready for the next session.
I would say the same for myself. It was the first time going up there to actually hand out things. Like, the first office was intimidating, and then seeing how the response came back was like, oh, this will be easier than I thought it would be. And it comes down like what David said was, to me, it was, there's a pitch. It's a sales pitch. You're trying to convince them to buy your argument. And it's like, we have sound and reason, and we want you to become, to an extent, emotionally attached to us, because we are everyday people and we matter. And by like the third week, I was ready to go in. I was like, all right, I got this. I can do this.
Yeah.
Y'all come with me. Watch this. This doesn't have to be hard.
I can definitely sympathize with that. In 2017 was my first like real action at the Capitol. What I did find encouraging, though, is that as we were going into legislators' offices, whether they were representatives or senators, most of the staff is very young
True.
people. And these are typically people that tend to be more receptive to the conversations about cannabis. So I found it very encouraging to talk to some of these young people. It was able to facilitate conversations through young people to the legislators. So, and it just feels like that is more and more accepted as we move forward.
Well, we're going to go into our first sponsor break here at the Lonestar Collective. I'm your host, Jesse Williams, joined by co-host Austin Zamhariri. This is episode 31. Our guests this week, Lisa Bueno and David Bass. We will be right back.
Austinite Cannabis Company is an Austin, Texas, locally owned and family-operated producer and seller of handcrafted cannabis products such as CBD, CBG, CBN, and Delta-8 made from hemp in Austin, Texas. Their selection of products includes beauty products, concentrates, edibles, merch, pet supplies, pre-rolls, tinctures, topicals, and accessories. For more information, visit austinitecannabis.co, or you can visit their storefront location at 2009 East Cesar Chavez Street in Austin, Texas.
Oak Cliff Cultivators is a sponsor of Texas Cannabis Collective and Lonestar Collective podcast. Oak Cliff focuses on quality assurance with their hemp products while providing customer service to help you discover cannabinoids to meet your needs. Their product line includes hemp flower pre-rolls, CBG tinctures, edibles, Delta-8, and merch. For more information on their products' quality or to shop online today, visit oakcliffcultivators.com or contact them at info@oakcliffcultivators.com.
Texas Cannabis Collective now has a Patreon account for those looking to make recurring donations to the nonprofit and advance cannabis legalization in the state of Texas. Perks include having your name on the credits of our podcast videos, access to exclusive content online, shout-outs on the recording of the podcast, and the title of being cool like that. Basic perks cost less than 1 cup of Starbucks a month and help to make a change in Texas. Visit patreon.com/TX Cannabis Collective for more information.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast, distributed on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and much more, to give Texans information regarding policy, industry, and culture. Here is this week's host, Jesse Williams and Austin Zamhariri.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Williams, joined by co-host Austin Zamhariri. Our guest this week, Lisa Bueno of Vet Coalition and David Bass of Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. We were just discussing about how going into legislators' offices and how the staff seems to be more receptive at times than the actual representative or senator we're having to talk to and give information to. And I can attest the same thing. Going into Donna Campbell's office, her staffers were very receptive this last session, despite she was not very receptive to the concentrates change.
No. She said she isn't ready for that. She's not quite there on the issue, were the words that she told me when I met her a couple months ago.
Are you talking about as far as the penalties reduction on concentrates, Moody's bill?
She's just period on cannabis. She seems hard to, she didn't even want to hear medical. So She didn't want to hear anything about medical. She wasn't going to want to hear anything about penalty reduction.
Yeah, her staff, when I talked to them, one of them had even told me that they had tried highlighting the issue that probably everybody in the office had some sort of vape pen, even if it was a CBD vape pen, and that if they got pulled over, they were likely going to be facing felony charges, and that the response was kind of like, "Don't care. Maybe you shouldn't do that."
Sounds like her.
Senator Campbell, in 2019 on the Senate floor had some unsavory statistics to present, and I think in retrospect, as we've moved forward, have not aged well, if you will, and so she may be trying to just kind of inch away from the whole conversation altogether. But I know that she did support the expansion bill 3709 back in 2019, and she did vote for 1525 1535, yes,
35,
all mixed up. So she, Senator Campbell on the outside, I think it doesn't want to maybe be on a leadership side when it comes to cannabis reform. But I think from a medical standpoint, the votes are there if we can maneuver through the Senate. And I think we all understand how maneuvering through the Senate works. So without saying the big name.
Let's get into explicitly talking about this year's Texas Veterans Medical Cannabis Conference. That's taking place at the Killeen Civic and Conference Center, correct, David?
Yes, it's a beautiful venue. This is actually our second medical cannabis seminar. We had a medical cannabis seminar at the Killeen Civic and Conference Center back in 2015. We had 100 veterans show up. We had fantastic media coverage. And so I'm looking forward to the same turnout or larger this time. And I've been sending out our press release to the local media and media down in Austin. So I'm hoping we'll get good media coverage again. And it's going to be a fantastic conference from 10 a.m. To 3:30 p.m. And we have some wonderful speakers lined up. And one thing I'm most excited is Mitch Fuller, who represents the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Texas. He is the head of their National Legislative Committee that works on national legislation. And he is going to come speak, and he is going to state why the Texas Veterans of Foreign Wars support a whole plant medical cannabis program in the state of Texas. That's very important for us, something we've been working on for many years.
I wish the Disabled American Veterans state level and national level would talk exactly like that, because my local chapter sure won't.
Yes, disabled American veterans are a little bit harder at the state level, but they're not against it, and neither is the American Legion. So I think with VFW leading the way, the American Legion and disabled American veterans will not be too far behind.
Yeah, there's slowly some change coming with them. And Mitch he's a great guy. I was glad I got to meet him this last session at the Capitol and get to have a couple discussions with him. And he's definitely the guy to know now that I've met him and seen the capacity he has and what he does at the Capitol. Definitely the guy to be connected to as far as veterans go on this issue, in my personal opinion.
And I'm a member of his chapter in Leander, and they have a Delta 8 vending machine right there in the VFW.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I go there and I see the veterans come in. They'll go straight to the vending machine, get their Delta 8, put it in their pocket, take it home with them. And they're very happy with it.
Who are can you highlight some of the other speakers that will also be attending as well?
One of our featured speakers will be Representative Brad Buckley, who's our local House representative. Representative Buckley is a very conservative Republican. And me and Jason Walker and April Martinez met with him after he was elected 2 sessions ago. And he graciously met with us. And we took him some facts and a fact sheet and asked him to support a whole plant medical cannabis bill in the Texas House. And he sat there and listened quietly and politely to each of the 3 of us as we talked about why veterans need medical cannabis in Texas. And when we finished, he said, "Okay, you have my support." He said, "I believe in medical cannabis." And we were shocked. That's not exactly what we expected him to say, but it turns out that he has some close friends and family members who had been talking to him about CBD products and how these CBD products were helping them. And so the CBD and legalizing hemp was the pathway for Representative Brad Buckley to find himself in support of a medical cannabis program in Texas. And he told us, he complimented us. He said, "Now, I want to tell y'all, this is exactly how it's done. This is how you should be approaching legislators. You're well dressed, you're professional, you're well prepared, you have facts, you have some medical documents for me to look at." And ever since then, we've had his support not only for whole plant medical cannabis, but last session, he voted in favor of the decrim bills. And so now we have a very conservative Republican, Representative Brad Buckley, in favor of decrim because he came around to understand that the people in his district do not believe that they should be arrested for possessing cannabis. They don't want their 18-year-old kids arrested for possessing cannabis. And so he wasn't for it when we first talked to him. He was for medical, but not decrim. And then the next session, there he was voting yes for decrim. So to me, that's how we achieve victory in Texas, just incrementally by being very professional when we approach our legislators and being patient.
Lisa, who's your representative where you're at in New Braunfels?
John Kemple.
Has he been receptive? Would you say that he's been kind of lukewarm on the topic?
To be honest, I honestly don't know. Yeah, I'll be honest. Yeah, I know Don Campbell, and that's about who I keep up with here. But yeah, I got to be honest.
I'm saying we both share the same senator, Donna Campbell. I won't after this next election because of the district changes, the redistricting, the maps. And she was receptive to me when I came in 2019, and then I said a moment ago that kind of changed around. My representative, though, on the flip side is Vicki Goodwin, and Vicki Goodwin has been very receptive about this and very opening to listen to what we have to say and take care of things and specific angles we're needing to look at, like how we had the concept of I guess like DSHS at being able to add conditions to the list of medical conditions that are approved that got removed in 2019. It got put back in the bill this time, and like I was like, this is the one thing, please fight to keep this in the bill. This is an essential component to this bill this time. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I agree. We shouldn't be having to go over this every 2 years when health professionals should be doing this." So she has been very receptive to these concepts that we've been putting forward, as long as we put forward, like I say, logic and fact with it. I did want to ask David, you know so much about this conference center. How many people can we fit in this conference center? What's the max?
I believe that we can fit up to 200 people easy. We're setting up the chairs with a little bit of space between them because we are still in the pandemic. But if more people show up, then we're currently set up for 100 because that's normally how many veterans, between 85 and 100 veterans show up at our seminars. But if we have more show up, we can get some more chairs to put in there.
Well, I'm hoping we can get the 200. I want the 200. I
that would be great.
I want to see a double or nothing on this. I mean, it's been a radical change the last 2 years, and polls are showing it. And I hope that the polls aren't wrong and the veterans will show up and confirm those numbers. But we're going to go into our second sponsor break here at the Lonestar Collective. I'm your host, Jesse Williams, joined with co-host Austin Zamhariri. Our guests this week, Lisa Bueno and David Bass. We will be right back after this sponsor messages.
Austinite Cannabis Company is an Austin, Texas, locally owned and family-operated producer and seller of handcrafted cannabis products such as CBD, CBG, CBN, and Delta-8 made from hemp in Austin, Texas. Their selection of products includes beauty products, concentrates, edibles, merch, pet supplies, pre-rolls, tinctures, topicals, and accessories. For more information, visit austinitecannabis.co, or you can visit their storefront location at 2009 East Cesar Chavez Street in Austin, Texas.
Oak Cliff Cultivators is a sponsor of Texas Cannabis Collective and Lonestar Collective podcast. Oak Cliff focuses on quality assurance with their hemp products while providing customer service to help you discover cannabinoids to meet your needs. Their product line includes hemp flower, pre-rolls, CBG tinctures, edibles, Delta-8, and merch. For more information on their products' quality or to shop online today, visit oakcliffcultivators.com or contact them at info@oakcliffcultivators.com.
Texas Cannabis Collective now has a Patreon account for those looking to make recurring donations to the nonprofit and advance cannabis legalization in the state of Texas. Perks include having your name on the credits of our podcast videos, access to exclusive content online, shout outs on the recording of the podcast, and the title of being cool like that. Basic perks cost less than 1 cup of Starbucks a month and help to make a change in Texas. Visit patreon.com/TX Cannabis Collective for more information.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast, distributed on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and much more, to give Texans information regarding policy, industry, and culture. Here is this week's host, Jesse Williams and Austin Zamhariri.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Williams. This is episode 31. I'm joined by co-host Austin Zamhariri. This week, our guest is David Bass and Lisa Bueno. We're talking about the Texas Veterans Medical Cannabis Conference taking place April 16th, starting at 10:30 a.m. at the Killeen Civic Conference Center. We're gonna pack this place.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be disappointed if we don't.
Well, hopefully, and what's great here is I'm not even a veteran, right? But I've always believed as a civilian, it's our duty to help serve with our other veterans that are out there. And it's been such an honor over the years to, connect other veterans. And, now we're getting veterans into the Texas Compassionate Use Program. And I know David and Lisa can both testify to the growth of what's happening. All three of you, in fact, were part of the compassionate cultivation study. And so it's really just been such an awesome experience to see our veterans starting to get access. We're not completely there yet. We still have a tremendous amount of work to do. But I'd like to hear from both David and Lisa on their experiences with compassionate use and how that has impacted their day-to-day lives? We'll start with you, David, first.
Well, on September 1st, I became a legal medical cannabis patient in Texas for post-traumatic stress disorder. I also qualify for cancer. And I started using these Texas Original gummies, 1-to-1 in the day, which is 5 milligrams of CBD, 5 milligrams of THC, and 0-to-1 in the evening, 10 milligrams of THC. And I've been using flower, vaping a half a gram of good, nice flower in my PAX vaporizer 3 times a day ever since 2012. So I went into this with some trepidation because I knew my 3 half gram doses of cannabis flower each day in my PAX vaporizer worked perfectly. And now I was getting ready to change my regimen to these gummies. But it was a very smooth transition. They're just little edibles. That's what they are. And the plants that produce the THC are real cannabis plants with no THC limit. And so basically I went from primarily using flower to using these little edibles. And it was a smooth transition. The gummies work just as good as the flower, but the medicine is too expensive. It's too difficult for patients and veterans to get access, and we want flower. So there's no reason why Texas OG and Good Blend, that they're growing fantastic plants, really wonderful cannabis plants here in Texas. And we want them to be able to sell that flower to patients and veterans in Texas. So we're never going to stop working until we all have access to flower through the medical cannabis program, and the prices are reasonable and access is easy.
Lisa, how about you? In fact, you work for Go Blend, am I correct?
That is correct.
Tell us about that.
I'm on the production team at Good Blend, so I get to help make all the products. So it's pretty fun. I get to work hands-on every day with the gummies, the tinctures, our lotions, our drinks, everything that we make. And last week, which was really fun, my favorite part so far, I got to take part in my first harvest. So that was awesome. Pounds of awesome, just beautiful cannabis that we can't smoke. It was actually a little heartbreaking while we were harvesting it, because we're not harvesting, to make it pretty. So we're literally just shucking these nice, beautiful buds off the stalk to get some oil out of. But yes, beautiful cannabis. And we definitely need a whole plant here in Texas. That's one of the things that I know I need personally. I mean, I'm sitting here smoking a joint now this whole time. I smoke flower all throughout the day still. I do use the teacup meds still. They just don't have the same effect on me as flower does. For one, I get a lot of nausea. So a tincture, a gummy is not, I don't want to put, I don't want to have anything. I don't want to ingest anything when I'm nauseous. It's easier to smoke something. It has helped though. I was very, very skeptical going into the study in the beginning with the compassionate program. Like I'm a heavy flower smoker. I'll smoke up to an ounce a week usually. So going in, I wasn't, I wasn't convinced, that this stuff would work right away. But literally, I became a believer overnight when I took I'm the opposite of Dave. Like I have to use the 1-to-1 for me makes me sleepy. I use that one at nighttime. Anything with CBD makes me a little drowsy. So I took, I believe it was 4 mils of that 1-to-1 that first night, and I had the best sleep that I have had in years. And for me, I know it's not just me. It's, when it comes with PTSD, nightmares, their night terrors are huge. And that's, I can't remember, it had been a long time since I had gone without nightmares. And so that first night I had the most amazing sleep. And so from then on, I was like, all right, maybe this stuff is legit. Maybe, this 1%, the cap that, maybe we should give it a chance and not knock it, before you actually try it. So I use the tinctures primarily from the get-go. They work. It's just I have to use so much, and when you're taking 5 droppers of oil at a time, it's not good. So I still heavily use flour, although now with Good Blend, I have been using more of our products. What helps being getting that employee discount, because like Dave said, the prices are outrageous. After I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to fully participate in the program because of the cost, and I know my situation is not unique, so it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. I was just packing orders today, and to see some of the receipts, it's heartbreaking. Like, I don't know how these people are doing it. I mean, $1,000 easily, and so if I didn't have that employee discount, I wouldn't be able to take advantage of the program like I do. So I'm definitely grateful for that. So on top of loving my job, I also get that nice discount.
Mhm.
And I'm personally in the position where I had done flour before. I'd been using flour. I got to the point where I could not risk it anymore because I've got a child, and I could not risk having issues with the state. And I'd been to legal states. I'd been out to Colorado and had tried legal product out there. And I was under this presumption that edibles did not really work for me, because I went out there and practically ate a chocolate bar and got nothing out of it. And I was sorely disappointed. And when I got into the medical program September last year, like David, September 1st, and I pick up my script, it was something where I was like, wow, I can actually feel this. I can feel the difference on this product. And I started realizing, man, I've just had garbage edibles in the past. And it really is this big difference between 5-6 years ago, when edibles were coming on the market, to say, or even 7 or 8 years ago, legal edibles were hitting versus actual medical product. And I never could understand that argument for the longest time of why people were so upset about the legal rec market versus medical. And then I saw that quality that you get out of a medical program. And then I started seeing the rec market started to actually catch up with that. But then, like Lisa said, it's cost. It's insane, because it's what 300 milligrams is usually what's typical in a bottle in the state for the 0 to 1. 30 milliliter bottle.
About 30 milliliter, yeah.
And you get 300 milligrams. And as opposed to right now, or even under our own hemp program, you can buy 500 milligrams for $600 under the hemp program and get it in gummies. So yeah, it's like David said, we've got to provide more access so we can get this cost driven down.
Right. And also to touch on David's point about access to flour. And I know it's hard it's kind of, we've been taught for so long, the idea of smoking is not healthy for you. It's not good for you. And to a degree, yes, that's true. However, inhalation of cannabis vapor and smoke, that hits the bloodstream a lot faster than ingesting it. Right. And so, and I remember Dr. Brimberry when we were at the policy conference at Texas A&M. I just definitely remember how he was very much in support of smokables because, he has patients that will wake up from night terrors in the middle of the night. And why should they take a gummy that's going to take 30, 45 minutes to take effect when they can take a vaporizer and have that effect in minutes or less? And so the idea of smokables is something I think is a a barrier that we're going to have to continue to fight, because just this idea, we've been taught for so long, just it's been ingrained that smoking isn't healthy. So when it comes to ingesting and inhaling cannabis vapor, that is just something that we're going to have to bring more data, more facts, and show more research on, and how that's helping patients. Do you guys have any opinions on that?
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, I always have something next to me to smoke, especially at nighttime. I don't, it's very rare that I wake up from nightmares now, but on the occasion that I do, or now what wakes me up most of the time are my dogs. My dogs are getting old. They wake me up to go out in the middle of the night now. So when that happens and I need to go back to sleep, I keep a pipe next to my bed. I take a couple hits off my pipe and I go back to sleep. Whereas before I would be up the rest of the night. So definitely agree that we need flower, and that we need the education just across the board. One thing that I've really learned, that I'm really seeing working over at Good Blend, is just seeing and patients need to be educated. Doctors really need to be educated. Seeing the way that scripts are written, it's wow. Definitely we need some doctor education there. I think we need more like Dr. Brimberry leading the way. I really like that he's going out there and trying to take the lead and educate more of these doctors. So respect for what he does.
Yeah, and I think that a key objective in 2023, probably the number one objective with our legislators, is to get rid of the THC cap of 1% by weight, and convince our legislators to let doctors decide the dosage under the compassionate use program, just like they do with any other medication. And then if we can get rid of the THC cap, then, and I spoke to Morris Denton at Texas OG about this, and he is 100% in agreement. If we can get rid of the THC cap, then we can have vape products. And the vape products do not have the stigma like flower does. And all of these CBD vape products is helping take away the stigma. And so I believe, along with Morris, that first we get vape products into the compassionate use program, and then flower will follow shortly after.
And that's what's so crazy right now about the compassionate use program, is that we're technically starting with felonies first, right? Like,
yeah,
products are felony on the black market, right? And flower is just a Class B misdemeanor. And we're starting with felonies and working our way backward.
Yes,
it's just,
that's true.
It's Texas, and what I like to remind people is that Texas is the long game. We are very old school in this state. We have our legislature meets only once every 2 years for 140 days, and to be honest with you, the first 6 weeks of the legislature is not a lot of action. A lot of times they're still trying to find where their offices are. So we have for 29, almost 30 million people in this state, we have a very tight legislative window to get all of the issues in Texas for a couple of years. And so it's a very difficult process, and we have a lot of work to do. It's funny because we were talking about legislators. My legislator is Representative Stephanie Click, who is the author of the Compassionate Use Act. And she's in a tight runoff right now in her district. So I never in my wildest dreams imagined that I would be voting for her twice in one election cycle. But her opponent is a very big, heavy law enforcement guy. He's former law enforcement and doesn't know anything about the compassionate use program. And so, my work here in my own District 91 is to see if we can bring back Representative Glick, because I do think that she has been open. When she introduced 1525, it was originally a 5% THC cap, right? And it included chronic pain. So it was a far more progressive bill than what ended up getting passed. So we do from who I like to call the queen, the mother of medical marijuana in Texas, Representative Click. She can accept that title or not, but she has been the one who's been able to get legislation across the finish line, past Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick to Governor Abbott, and into law 3 times. So hopefully we can get her back in, and we can have that conversation. I think she's more open to the ideas of flower. She's open to the ideas of smokable. She's open to the idea of the THC cap and maybe where that goes. And I think the evidence was there back in 2021. So we do have a lot of work to do. First, we have to get through these elections, and then once November comes and we know who's back in play, then we can really move forward with a strategy. But the work starts now, and I think David, Jesse, Lisa, you all will agree that the work starts now, and it starts with this conference, which is opening the idea that veterans can get access now, and that we can start the healing process now. And if everybody's ready to get involved, then we can make tremendous progress in 2023. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. And one of our speakers at the Veteran Conference is Jax James from the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Law. And Jax will discuss our strategy and tactics for 2023. So I'm really excited to listen to Jax's insights about how we are going to approach the legislative session in 2023. And of course, we will all be advocating for 3 areas of marijuana reform in Texas. We'll be advocating for a whole plant medical cannabis program. We'll be advocating for penalty reduction bills. And as always, we will be looking our legislators in the eyes and saying, we need to end prohibition in Texas. That is the right and just thing to do.
Something personally that's been on my mind, and it goes into what you were talking about earlier, David, with the vape leading to flower. And it's something I've been trying to present to pretty much anybody that listen or can understand. And I realized the beans were doing a video. What I could actually explain it a lot easier is this is a nebulizer device. And for those who are listening to the podcast, you can go on YouTube and find our videos of these podcasts. But this is a nebulizer device, a little air hose hooks to the bottom of it. And it basically turns a liquid solution into a vapor without using heat. And as far as I know right now, nothing in the compassionate use program says we can't use nebulizer treatments as an inhalant. It says we can't burn it. It can't be ignited by flame, but nothing says about doing it this method. And apparently there have been people who have found ways to make nebulizer treatments out of this. So I'm hoping we can get Good Blend and Texas Compassionate Original Cultivation to come up with some version of this to show this, like, inhalants aren't this evil item. And then it leads into, well, it's a lot cheaper and easier if we use vapes. And then I realize none of this is the danger it is as long as we keep this properly regulated and we can move into full flower.
Yeah, and one of the issues with the nebulizer, actually, that actually is something that I've heard about before, and it's the THC cap. You know, it's hard to fit that the amount of THC into such a light product.
Dry weight,
it's concentrated, right, with the dry weight. So that's where we run into the issue with that. And the dosing, the way that the doctors have to write the prescriptions, it's harder for them to write a prescription if you're doing something like a powder or a liquid, which there are some that are alcohol based, and I've inhaled some of those, like taken a whiff of some, and that's not something that you want to be, inhaling in a nebulizer for sure. So if we get that the THC cap lifted, and we can work on the by weight, that the nebulizer could be, a feasible option in the future.
Well, I did also want to show, because I do nebulizer treatments. This is a 2 milliliter vial, and they put 0.5 milligrams into a little 2 milliliter vial. And I wound up having to take another 1 milligram, another 0.5 with 1 milliliter. So definitely within that device, I'd say where our caps are right now, we could probably get the typical dosage we're seeing. But yeah, the cap would definitely have to be raised a little bit to be way more effective compared to vaping.
That and the way that doctors have to write the scripts. That's a big factor too.
Well, are there any final notes that y'all want to put out about this conference? Something that's been on your mind that you want to talk about as we wrap this up?
Well, I'm really excited that Dr. Brimberry will be one of our speakers, and he will explain exactly how cannabis helps post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. Wendy Askew, an Air Force veteran, will discuss hemp derivatives and explain Delta 8, Delta 9, and how these products are being used as medicine in Texas. And I'm real excited because Ian Benwees, U.S. Army veteran, will give us a tutorial on entheogenic medicine and explain House Bill 1802, the psilocybin research bill. And so we have some veterans who are going to bring some extreme wonderful knowledge to our attendees about cannabis, about hemp derivatives, and about entheogenic medicine.
Anything you want to add, Lisa?
I just want to say, come out and learn, come see what it's all about. This will be a learning experience for me. This is going to be my first conference. I just like to say I'm still in my rookie season in the cannabis game. So come out, learn with me, and then let's so then we can go educate everybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to, and not just that, but there's a Cannabis Cup that's happening later that afternoon, which, David, I believe you've been able to lock in. Any veteran, if you're traveling towards Austin and you want to go to the Cannabis Cup, they get free access. Can you expound on that?
Yes, our good friend who is sponsoring this hemp event in Austin has said that it's Robert Flores, right?
Robert Ramirez.
Robert Ramirez, thank you. Robert Ramirez said, Dave, you tell the veterans at that conference that if they want to come down to Austin after the medical cannabis event to our hemp event, they'll get a free general admission ticket. And so we really appreciate Robert doing this. And so as soon as our medical cannabis conference is over, we're all going to jump in our vehicles and head down to Austin and attend a fantastic hemp event with a whole lot of CBD products, hemp knowledge, sponsored by our good friend, Robert Ramirez.
Well, thank you for that information. For anybody looking for more information about the event, wanting to show that they're supporting it right now, online right now, Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana can be found at Texas spelled out, Vets for MMJ, that's on Facebook, and Veterans Educating Texans Coalition. The Vet Coalition can be found at txvetco.org. There's a press release there. You can see the speakers, their backgrounds, what we're discussing. See, David wrote up a great press release. We posted that up. We've posted up the flyer there. You can find more information on those two locations. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Lonestar Collective. This was episode 31. Our guest, David Bass, Lisa Bueno. I'm joined by co-host Austin Zamhariri. We hope everybody has a great week, and we want to see you at this conference. Tell a veteran, be there, be square. We love y'all. Peace. Adios.